Hello again. We're back.
Hey, everyone.
I am Jen Brazelli.
I am Kyle Godby, and these are our field notes from the swamp.
Um, okay, so just before we hit record, you were just asking me about my t-shirt, which is
Obituary.
the band Obituary. And I
Yeah.
know I won't be able to show you guys well, maybe you can see there's like a little zombie guy laying in a gutter. And I laughed
Mm-hmm.
and I said we should hit record rather than chat about this beforehand because it's a fun little story that has almost nothing to do with things we usually talk about, except for maybe the thing. So warm data style.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this shirt is a favorite. When I go to put it on, it always reminds me of my wedding. And here's why.
Love it.
So this
Love it. All right.
album, this album is called Slowly We Rot. And on the back,
Yes,
it's
that's
got
it.
the name of I don't know if I turn around, you guys would be able to see it. Like, I don't know.
We
But
got it.
it's
Yep.
in like, yeah, you get like drippy words. Okay. So basically, this is one of my favorite bands, one of my favorite styles of metal, etc. Old album. So when my husband and I got married, we wanted to create like cool, unique wedding invitations. And this was back when I don't even know what's in anymore, but this was back when people were making kind of neat things that were not, they were like physical invitations, but they weren't literally just cards in an envelope. And we had the idea to
Mm-hmm.
make a like a record, a 7-inch record, because among our people, 7-inch records, especially for like punk and hardcore and stuff, were
Mm-hmm.
the thing. So we thought it would be fun to basically cut, from cardstock, different colors and things, something that looked like a record and that would have something on there like Jen and Brian, blah, blah, blah. And then it would come in a sleeve, like a plastic sleeve, and that would come inside the envelope and it would have like an insert, like liner notes that would have information about the wedding. So again, this was before everyone had cell phones and things. So it included, the normal info about the ceremony, the reception, a little map that I had to make by hand and figure out the right way to like organize the information. Da, da, da. Okay, so we had this idea. So for family and for just normal people, we basically just left it at that. We made it look like a cute record because people knew we loved music. So it was, oh, I just received a little record in the mail and it's, a piece of, like I said, cardstock. And you take it out of the sleeve and you're having the experience of opening the liner notes and it's you've been invited and come, whatever. And the cover on, either side of the record just said Jen and Brian, except we created a limited run, special run. In fact, I didn't even think about this right now. I should actually see if I can find this. It should be on a shelf over here, but I'm not going to look because I remember looking for it. We saved a copy and I looked for it a year ago and couldn't find it, but it's in there somewhere. For the special Friends edition, we each picked an album that we loved. So my husband picked a hardcore band and I picked this album, Slowly We Rot. But the best part was that we wanted to like Photoshop ourselves into the cover of the album. So this is the shirt you saw here is the cover of this album. So I had Brian take a picture of me on like an old fashioned digital camera, no cell phones, lying like in the position of the zombie. Like I had to really get it right. Okay. And then I basically had to figure out how I could Photoshop myself in and change where it says obituary here to say Jen Brazelli. And then we did the same thing for Brian on his. And I had never done anything like this. Like I hadn't used
What
tools
was his?
side by
I gotta know.
side. What was the name of the album? I forget, but the cover of the album, if you Google side, actually, sorry, listeners, you guys are just here for the ride.
I don't know
Um,
side by side.
we can always like cut the searching if we have to. I don't know. You're only young once. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So if you Google, I'm gonna come back to the camera and look at the camera. So side by side, you're only young once, and it's like a black, just a solid black, with like white silhouettes of three humans. Just I think it's the band just standing in different positions. And so Brian said in the side by side spot, Brian Gretzi, that's his name. And then we changed the words. So like obituary said Jen Brazelli, and then instead of slowly we rot for mine, it was slowly we wed. And then for Brian's, it was you're only young once. So we changed it to you only wed once. Okay. But again, the thing here to remember everybody is I had like this was before I was in the world of design. I was a physics teacher at this point. So I had never ever engaged with any creative tooling of any kind to do something like this. And I was like, I gotta figure this out. This is too fun of an idea not to do. So I couldn't afford Photoshop, but I downloaded whatever the free, was it GIMP or GIMP shop or something, like, the bootleg of Photoshop. And I taught myself how to use it well enough that I was able to import that photo of me into the cover. I was able to get the cover from somewhere and like slap it in. And then I like had to go through the trouble of like figuring out how to like, okay, the B would work for Brazelli, but I had to make it bigger and put it here. And I had to create and mash things together. You know, it was like the most time consuming thing. And I was like, this is so much work, but I was loving it. And it wasn't just like working in Photoshop, because fuck that. But it was just all of the act of recreating something meaningful and different and cool and neat and, oh, we're so
Mm-hmm.
clever, ha ha ha. And then, you know, even the liner notes, designing, not just like deciding what text would go in there, but the design of the layout, for the directions, which sounds really trivial, but where our reception was held, like really needed some unique directions because people were going to get lost. So figuring out the right way to show, okay, here are the streets in like very light gray, and then here's the actual route in dark gray, but let us also show you these. And it was like figuring out how to do that and trace it. And again, Google Maps really wasn't a thing yet. So I'm doing it based on like an old fashioned atlas map that I traced and then did it. Okay. So we create these. We love them. Our friends love them. It was too much fun. Fast forward a couple years when I decide to leave my job, take the leap, and apply to the Master's of Design program at CMU. And they want a portfolio. And I'm like, I'm not a designer and I'm not an experienced designer, but you know, I make the case and I include some things like, here's a lesson plan. This is experience design, you know, and a few other things. And I was like, I'll include the invitation because I had to like learn how to use these things. I picked up the
Mm-hmm.
tools, but more importantly, I was thinking about the experience of the invitee, the wedding guest. And I had to like think about the experience both in terms of like the unboxing of, you know, this thing, this invitation, the opening it up and looking at the liner notes, and then also just thinking about what information design needed to happen in that thing. And I remember thinking like, is this weird that I'm applying to a Master of Design program and including this invitation that is like this thing? And I mean, history, we all know I got in and the rest is history. But when I go to put this shirt on now, I think about how like, this is probably the reason that I am where I am today. Thank you, Obituary. So there was my fun little adventure for us.
All right, you need to tag them in this posting, and I think they need to hear that story. I don't know those guys. I don't know if they'd appreciate that or not. The
I
Carcass
don't know.
guys would tell that story on stage.
That's interesting. I actually have never even thought about that. I saw them a couple of years ago. They've played in recent years. They tour. I actually think I've seen
Mm-hmm.
them twice in recent years, and I didn't expect them to be very good because how you know how long it's been, but
Like 60 now, yeah.
really good, really good. Um, maybe I will. Maybe I will. Anyway, I just it
Yeah.
got me thinking, and maybe this is an interesting topic. Today's all about just whatever the heck our brains go to today. Uh, the notion that things, I mean, obviously there's like you never know what's gonna influence what and path dependence and all that blah, but the way that you can tell the post hoc story that points to in hindsight, was there a cause here that led to an effect? No, I'm not talking about it that way, but just it brings me a level of personal joy and coherence to throw on this shirt, which is extremely old. But when I do, it isn't just that's a band I like. It's, oh, remember the time I did that? Oh, that was fun. I learned some things. Oh, yeah. And then our wedding was really fun. And oh, you know, and then all the memories flow. And I joke, but I don't joke that like that both taught me some things, but also opened a conversation for me with a program, which then led to other things in my life that are very cool. So I don't know how often people do that or reflect on that kind of stuff. And if
Mm-hmm.
people do it unprompted or they have to be prompted by something, but it's just got me kind of thinking about like when in your life do you make that kind of post hoc connection? And, you know, should we do it more? Should we do it less? Does it matter? Is it part of the work we do?
That's really interesting. I want to go into metal, but I want to jump in
I
under
know, I know.
that.
This
Like,
today's going to be
like,
another metal one, guys. But well, pick
yeah.
whichever. I mean,
Well, I'll start with that. Like, I think I learned this. You know, I've been through a number of layoffs, and I've been through it like I think we talked about. Like, you know, I started in music production, moved into music business. Thought I was going to dip into tech for a few minutes, and ended up in e-commerce and process design, and that got me into service design, and now
we're
where
all
we
in
are
tech
now.
now. Come on, be real.
Right, but I mean, I was actually like, I went and got my one of my Cisco certifications when I worked
Mhm.
at IBM.
I
I was
know.
doing PBX administration, like
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So very different trajectory. Luckily, that was still the era when IBM was laying off every year. So I didn't have a lot of time spent there, but I knew that that was enough, that that was not my trajectory.
Yeah.
Watching a box blink was not going to work for me. But um, what I've, what I got, I ended up being forced to do this probably more times than I acknowledge. But um, I think I realized it when I was at Circuit City shut down in '09, when everybody was out of work. And now it's time, so where do I go next? But I had to look back and reframe a lot of my resume. It wasn't about the title that I held at that company,
Yeah.
because that had context in that one place. It made sense to the people that were around me there. That it fit into the organization. It was a puzzle piece that made sense there. But elsewhere, those titles, that name, I had to reframe it to a more generic, this is the work that I did. Even now, like my title at Capital One for a period of time was process manager, but I spent half of that time as a product owner and the other half as a service designer.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't say process manager on my resume at all
Yeah.
anywhere. It doesn't need to, because that doesn't mean anything. But that reframing, even I go back when I got my first job, when I got my job in sound design at C5. It was the same sort of thing, kind of what you were talking about, where I needed to give them a portfolio. I've never worked on a movie before. I never worked on anything that beyond. How I got sort of into this was um, everybody, I knew a bunch of Tisch kids when I was in college, and everybody wants to make film, but nobody wants to touch sound. Everybody wants to edit, but nobody wants to touch sound, or they want to film, or they want to be on set and work with actors. Nobody wants to touch sound. And so when I popped up and was like, I don't have any interest in any of that other stuff, but I want sounds, I became like the dumping ground for, here's my project. Can you do the sound for me? Yes, please. Thank you. But also just like all of my weird field recording stuff and all of the sort of noise and experimental music I was making back in those days. Suddenly it was, I can hand you all of this. And that was enough. They were like, all right, well, you know how to fuck with sound. So
Mm.
you're on, let's go. None of that was strategic. There was no, if I
Mm-hmm.
do this, it will lead to this. And the part of it is the let's fuck around. The other part is the sort of retrospective reframing of
Mm-hmm.
that was one Lego in the larger composition that is today. But it's when I talk to people and we're talking about like generalists a lot, kind of navigating this work. The number of times that I've heard their stories and then they're going, I don't know how to make this leap. I'm like, you're not making a leap. You're just changing some of the words in your story.
Yeah.
You're there,
I feel like I
you
say this
know?
to people constantly when they want advice on career stuff like that. Yeah.
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 It,
Okay. This is interesting. I promise we're going to go back to metal.
good.
Or at least I will allow it. um, but so in telling this story, which was just a little blip of whatever, this moment it reminded me, I don't usually think of that example. So I think you're right to say that one of the places people do this probably most often is when they have to pause and tell about themselves, which happens a lot when you're either changing a job or you are being interviewed for something, whatever, and you have to think about and make some kind of coherent story out of your past. Like, where is the place in our lives where we are expected to make a coherent story out of the past when we're interviewing for a job or when we're trying to put together a case study or something like that, maybe something of that sort. I almost never think of this story in that way, which is really interesting because it is exactly another example of that. It was something I did later then use in the portfolio for my application to a grad program. But like, it's for some reason that I think partly because it came like early, like it was school, it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
job stuff. Whereas then later, everything you've just described, I had to do and continue to do if I talk about the other thread of my life, which everyone's already heard a million times, from physics to education to design to whatever. So, but it's interesting because as you were talking, you said, it wasn't strategic. And I just wrote down,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, because you know why? Because there's no such thing as strategy. Like, can we just say it? Like, strategy isn't real. And I
Right.
think that maybe there's a secret core here, which is that, you made the point. If what you think was strategic, I encourage you to go back and figure out whether it was actually just retrospective reframing or post hoc rationalization. And
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, the reverse is also true. If you think what you're doing is setting strategy for the future, I got news for you. Go listen to the previous 22 episodes or anybody else who writes about complexity, right?
Yeah.
There is anticipatory, prefigurative, you know, social practice change. There is stuff, but whether I would
Mm-hmm.
call that quote strategy, I think strategy looking forward is just the art of decision making and making choices. And I think strategy looking backwards is just post hoc, retrospective reframing. And so
Yeah.
today's theme is there's no such thing as strategy. And this little
I
story
love
was,
it.
was the kickoff. But I will leave it at that and allow you to take it wherever you want to go, metal or otherwise.
Oh shit. Well, I want to add one thing to that,
Good.
and that's just
Go ahead.
noticing is the other important part
Oh,
of
of
this. Because
course.
like, I would say I have a strategy of increasing my connections. I want to invite people to reach out to me through this medium, through LinkedIn,
Everybody
through
reach
other
out to
conversations,
Kyle. If
whatever. Please
you're not, I mean,
blow up my
honestly, there's
mailbox.
probably what, 26 of you, 35 of you. If you haven't already talked to Kyle, it
Yeah,
would
please
make
do.
his day.
I promise I'm approachable.
You can,
Exactly.
you can contact me too if you
And
want.
yeah, Jen's also approachable.
Go ahead.
But like those kind of like let's shoot the shit kind of conversations are always inspiring. They always who knows where they turn out. The strategy isn't I'm going to talk to this person so that I create this level of influence or
Yeah.
impact or any of that sort of stuff. But it is noticing that what got me excited in that conversation. What am I hearing from other people that are experiencing similar things or
Yeah.
very different things? And like that's
Not a
retrospectively that'll
strategy.
all come
Not a
together in
strategy.
a right. Exactly. That's not a strategy. The strategy
You're
is
like, I have a
connect.
strategy of trying to make connections. Not a strategy. That's what I love
Keep
about this.
it
I mean, it is you and
fundamental.
me, but like it's a
Right.
value, it's a goal, it's a drive, and instinct.
Yes.
But anyway, yeah, I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. You know what though, I would invite anybody
Mhm.
who does watch this. I would be curious to hear examples from people of things like this little story I told, or other stories where there's a fun way to look back and go, I didn't know it at the time, but that thing begat this thing that begat this thing that begat this thing, and not an example that comes from having to explain your resume at an interview. So something else in your life. I mean, and like the reality is there's a million of these all the time, like where you met your current partner, or, something about raising your kid, or an epiphany about a decision you made that changed the course of your life. In fact, I think this is what, is it Brian Klaas's book, Fluke? I'm
Mm-hmm.
accidentally kind of
Yep.
just recreating his book, which is basically the idea that you control less than you think, but you influence more than you realize. And like
Yep.
he makes all of this, he has a whole book about this. So I guess if this is appealing to
Mm-hmm.
you, go read his book. But I would be curious to hear the kinds of things that are out there when you are prompted to conjure one of these from scratch, rather than have it be something you're reminded of by something else. And if anybody's game to do that, I don't know, reply somewhere on YouTube or in LinkedIn or something.
Well, putting metal on the back burner
Oh
again,
no.
reluctantly. Um, that's the other thing that really jumped out at me is, when I get into the requirement engineering component of discovery work, go find out what all the users need. I walk in and I say to people, when you get out of think back to the last time that you got out of bed, excited to go do the thing you need to do. The morning where you're like energized in the shower and you're driving a little faster with the windows down and singing along, like where you've got bounce in your step and you're saying hello to everybody when you walk in the door. This is one of my favorite questions. There's like a battery of like four of them. That's one of them, but that's one of my favorites because it doesn't ask people directly what do you need or what's the thing that makes this work or doesn't work, where are the pain points and bright spots, any of that sort of stuff, because it goes to a story like what you were just telling,
Yes.
where you can tell how exciting that was, how passionate it was, the intrinsic motivation, like who you are in relationship to these other components that are present. that's more what I want to know than does somebody have their elevator pitch already refined on what they need to know, and like it's already built into their expectation of what they think is going on or what other people think they should be talking about.
Yeah.
So those oblique questions that really get to the you're also a person outside of work, you have to drive into work, you have to have I think of breaking those four questions between anticipation and expectation, and then the positive version of that versus the negative version. And that, not to be totally black and white on that, but the difference being, what are the mornings that you hit the snooze button a couple extra times and you don't want to get out of the shower
Yeah.
and you don't want to talk to anybody when you walk in the door? There's a dread there.
Yeah.
What's creating that?
Yeah.
What's the anchor that's dragging behind you?
What are
So
the four questions? You don't have to explain them, but you literally just teased them. I'm going to do our listeners a solid and be like, will you please rattle off the four?
yeah, this is what because empathy maps to me are like, all right, they've got a time and place, but this was my next version of empathy maps. And so it's a 4 box, but I will ask that question, what gets you excited in the morning? So that's the positive anticipation versus the dread and anticipation of those bad mornings. And then the other is on the other side of the day. When you walk out of when you're going home, or when you're doing, I'm putting this in the context of the office space,
Yeah.
which can morph a bit. When
Yeah.
you're done engaging in the thing that you want to engage with, when you're leaving and it's the day when you're waving to everybody and you've got a little bit more bounce in your step and you want to call someone and tell them about your day, what happened on that day? What was rewarding or fulfilling? How did you connect to it? And on the other days where you slam your laptop shut, and again, you kind of like, you go through the front door with your shoulder and you're flipping everyone off in traffic. What happened on that day that put you in that state? And it's not necessarily like opening that up beyond the workspace. I've seen people respond with, I had a bunch of shit going on. I'm a caretaker at home, and that's really stressful. There's nothing at work that survives that. And so it's totally legit. That's worth ingesting.
Yeah.
Would never get that insight by sitting down and saying, what are the features you need in this product or experience or service that is not there today?
I also think, and part of why, thank you for humoring me, because I do think about folks who might listen to this and still be like, I'm still dying to just hear more about the ways you guys actually do complexity work in your practice. And that strikes me as a good example. You and I have talked about those before. I have my own version of things. Probably a lot of people would do something like that. But if you've not ever really thought about that, is a very good example of how to obliquely approach / engage those feelings, experiences, etc. But there's a key that you mentioned too that I think is worth adding here for folks to pay attention to, which is you don't just ask people to like imagine. You're grounding it in an actual experience. You're saying, I don't know how you word it. It's probably different for each group, but like think about literally the last time you can remember where you left this building pissed. So you're really, hopefully, getting people to actually ground it in a real story, an experience, an anecdote, not I'm just like kind of making up an example of something that I think would lead me to do that. I mean, this is the principle behind a lot of the types of narrative research we always talk about, SenseMaker kind of platform built to handle, but like you don't need SenseMaker. You can do this kind of thing in a room on a poster if you're prompting people with the right language or the right framing and encouraging them to actually think of specific experiences they've had. Because again, you abstract away from the literal anecdote the aspects of that experience that then tell you something meaningful, or tell all of us meaningful things. They get to decide what's meaningful. So anyway, that's all. Thank you for humoring me, because I feel like I can hear like the voice of people. Wait, don't let him move on from that. Because
ground that. Yep. And I'll add another piece that was really interesting to me. The last time I did this, now I'm telling my last time story, because that's usually how I frame it. Tell me about the last time.
Right.
Because I also don't like, 8 years ago, the whole world had a different face on it altogether.
You got a 6-month time limit here, bud. You can't go back any further.
I don't even watch documentaries that are dated prior to 2020 anymore, because I just don't feel like they're relevant.
They're kind of quaint, what they are. Nostalgic.
Exactly. Oh, it wasn't this cute. We live in a different world now. I wonder what's the update to this. The last time I did this was, back in November, December, and I did an A/B sort of version of it where I was able to have one-on-one conversations with people. And I was kind of forced to do this as a survey. And because it was AB, I said,
Yeah.
sure, that's an easy concession for me to make.
Yeah.
I don't really believe in it, but I've never tried it. So I'm also open to that. Almost all of the surveys came back with people. I mean, the language was explicit. Tell us about the last time this happened.
Yeah.
They still went to a sort
Yeah.
of abstraction of,
Yes.
and these were all the way we did this was it was through user testing, so people are able to talk over. We did the voice recording and the screen recording, so they're not typing in responses. This wasn't like a shorthand response. They're going, well, it was probably a day when I had to, or most days like that I have to. The instinct is to generalize. It's
Yeah.
not to be vulnerable and personalize these things. And probably a lot of it's because they're talking at a laptop that's not talking.
Yeah.
It's not another warm face. But even when I have those conversations, at least half of the people start from there. And I usually have to come in and go,
Yeah.
can you have an example of the last time this happened? Can you
That's
think
the
back?
thing,
Take
though.
a minute.
Like, it needs an extra bit because
Mhm.
I'm willing to see that I think some of it is, as you said, that they're abstracting it because it's impersonal. But I also still think it's also just hard sometimes. Like, if you ask me
Sure.
right now to think about the last time I got up in the morning and was dreading something that was happening that day, like, it would take me a little bit to think about it. Like,
Sure.
I would probably do the same thing. I would be like, well, okay, let's think. There's nothing literally ready at hand cognitively for me to
Hmm.
grab. I don't literally have a memory of something like in my
Yeah.
working memory. So then my brain goes, well, let me kind of statistically piece together what are the most likely scenarios where I would find something like that and then go rooting through my brain for the memory.
Right. I know my pattern.
But I also know that I'm being asked to answer this thing and not sit there for 10 minutes thinking. So then I might
Sure.
just answer with the statistical LLM style answer instead of the human answer. So I think it's good to point that out, though, because if you're in person, it's much easier to like bring people to that next step to do that because you do want a real story. But it's funny you say it because the last few times that I've either used SenseMaker or similar survey equipment for something similar,
Hmm.
survey equipment, is that a thing? Survey tool? But
Yeah, it
I've
is.
had to do the same thing. I've slowly over time had to find more aggressive ways of trying to really highlight that we want an actual story with details and not.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, anyway, go ahead.
No, that was kind of it. But
Yeah.
what you're so I just co-hosted a Warm Data Lab last weekend,
Yeah.
and a thread that I heard, and I think this is I haven't heard anyone actually like name it in this particular way, but it's obvious that it's if you've never
Get
been to a
ready,
Warm Data
everyone.
Lab
Kyle's got
before.
stuff for all of you.
Yeah. So Warm Data Lab, it opens with somebody telling a story, and it's usually a pretty vulnerable, very human story.
Yeah.
And then it is just release into small groups and talk amongst yourselves is essentially it, and see what weaves. And then that's a free kind of roaming conversation after that. Well, the the vulnerability of that initial story, the sort of the not even the tone of it, but just the level of intimacy that comes from that becomes the model and the the level of permission that everyone else accepts. And everybody was talking about this. And I've never heard that being a big topic of conversation, usually because I think it's a group of people that I end up with in Warm Data Labs that are probably, I don't want to say desensitized, but we don't have to, we're used to this. And so, yeah, but this was a lot of new folks. And that was a thing that jumped out at them. It's difficult when we're doing those interviews, either one-on-one or in workshops or anything like that, having those conversations to be asking questions directly and not model the intimacy that we're asking for.
Yeah.
And this is where I like things like warm data and anecdote circles and that sort of stuff, where you can set that pace. It's not specific, but that's kind of okay. I don't need to extract
Yeah.
in that level of specificity
Right.
in that venue. So
Yeah.
that's another big component of it is what's the expectation of intimacy when we're just going through a sort of scripted set of questions that we're going to ask the next person. How depersonalized is it? So how do we set up those sort of environments where we can model that, we can make that permissive, really get into that. And then it's not even so much about like those individual stories are great, but it's capturing dozens of them, putting them into that 4 box, and then having everybody reread that and say, I see this pattern
Yep.
of, and then that's the big aha.
Yeah. And I will also say, just again, for the benefit of imaginary viewers that I'm in the mode of inhabiting, I guess. Um, yeah, maybe because of conversations I'm having in work for things right now, but for anyone listening, take that for, it's anticipatory, and then it's, I guess, retrospective, and it's positive or negative, or some version of that. It doesn't have to be about getting out of bed. It doesn't have to be about work. It can be about an engagement with a particular thing, a domain, a product, a tool. I mean, I wouldn't go into like literally like tell me about the last, but for those of you out there who are like, well, I don't work with like internal teams thinking about how we work together. I'm doing this with external customers, or I'm doing this with, hey, don't worry about that. Just think about those 4 that Kyle mentioned, because I do think this is a really useful little framework that maybe people haven't had a chance to experiment with some version of it. So, okay, and done shilling for the Kyle Godby 4x4 or 2x2.
I'll put that up. So I'll post that somewhere one of these days. It'll be on my Substack.
God loves a 2x2.
Oh my, yes. It's all run on a 2x2.
So, okay, that's all. I won't take it any further if you want to go back to metal or anything else for that matter.
I think where I was going with the metal was back to meaning again.
Okay.
Where, like when I'm talking to people, when I'm trying to figure out what people are interested in, kind of to rehash a little bit what I was just saying about that 2x2, but just in general, like, I don't want to ask about a problem that they had and how they tell me about a time when you had to deal with ornery stakeholders. What did you do to take care of? Like, they're gonna have a story, and they're gonna be able to fill in the blanks. And yes, that's a scenario that people are gonna end up in. But I want to know more about, like, what was a thing that like really like tempted you off the ledge? What was the thing that like pressed you to explore something? What was a time that you had a big like, I'm wrong here, aha, and you had to do a little bit of like eat some crow and about face kind of stuff, or just divert in some direction? Like, those, let me write the HR approved interview list, because that's,
everyone listening is like,
that's the kind of shit. Yeah. I'm not going to go work for Kyle now. That's all right. This is the sort of stuff, because
people go, that's too vulnerable for me, but not really in the right context. So,
and it doesn't have to be like, the stuff that lights us up, I don't know that we necessarily observe it. I've been working with a coach the last few weeks, and I'll start talking about stuff, and they're really good about noticing that you got excited. Your voice did a thing. Your face did a thing when you started talking about that. It's like, oh, I need to steer into that.
How do they even do that? Because I feel like that's about every 10 minutes in a conversation.
Very excitable. This is the format for that.
We would have to
but
stop.
When we're talking about,
we'd have to stop so often. I was like, Kyle, I really noticed you got excited. I mean, as a quick aside, I had a call with
put a counter
this morning that somebody I'd never met before, and he did say in the call, he said, I just love your energy. I feel like I'm doing a little like more listening and a little less talking than I usually do. Because he asked me a question and I was answering it. And he goes, and I just wanted you to keep talking because of your energy. And I was like, well, that's because you asked me something I am like super into. What do you want to happen? But then at the same time, him mentioning it, because we hit it off, and we were lucky we were on the same wavelength. But like in a lot of settings, for someone to say, I noticed your energy, I would immediately be like, I don't want to be perceived like outwardly like that. But a coach doing it, and at least in this, it sounds like I'll let you continue. Obviously, I've interrupted you like 4 times already, but I'm just so intrigued by this because it sounds like this person is good at doing this, not just noticing, but saying it to you in a way that feels like there's something productive in identifying it. So yes, carry on.
Yeah, I'm not good at tracking my own necessarily, and so that's big. But it makes me want to identify those things more when having some of these conversations.
Like with other people, like you want to.
Yeah,
don't do that to me. If you're ever like, I noticed you got really excited about
every
that.
10 minutes.
You're like, you seem like a toddler. Like, you're so excited about this or whatever. I would be like, oh my God, I'm mortified. No, I'm just kidding. But there's something about, I want people to notice. I think this is human. I want people to notice when I care about something or when how I'm feeling, just whatever, good or bad. I want people to notice and see me and how I'm responding to things. What I don't want is to have it like read back to me like I'm analyzing you, and here's what I've noticed. There's something so insanely triggeringly grating to me about that. Maybe that's a good topic for later, but go ahead.
It's fun. You are often excited about stuff that we talk about, and
I
it's
know.
probably just because this is the space for it. I also definitely noticed the things that you're like, I can't
I
be
think
bothered
most
to do.
people do because none of it's hard to
Oh,
see. Like I
hey,
have
do
become a
you want
lot.
to categorize some of these things? You're like, oh,
It's like it's we're on a tangent.
please.
I want to hear the rest of the coaching thing. So I'm tempted. Do you want to talk through that and I'll bring
There
it back
wasn't a
to
whole
this?
lot more to that
Say more
other
about
than
that. I will carry us back to this. Okay, you go.
okay. All right. There was I don't again it was a tangent, so I don't know how
Well,
much
you were
more of
talking
that there
about
was, but
meaning and metal and what people like and don't like, and then you were going on to say
yes,
you've
I
been
was
working with
gonna
a
sort of
coach.
start to dip into. I think I was gonna take us down the authenticity road
Do
for
it.
a moment. We don't need to beat that thing to death anymore. I
Okay.
promise. But it is the man. I I found such license when I found a group of people that I could show. Friday is casual day at the office. I'm going to show up in my Danzig shirt. And it was like, I'm actually working with a bunch of people that I would go see Danzig with. Danzig doesn't really tour like he used to, but I went and saw Carcass with. We were supposed to see Obituary, and for some reason we didn't end up seeing Obituary. But like, those are people that I worked with on a day to day basis.
Yeah.
That was very the sort of the masking is again another one of those ones that's a little beaten to death, but like the sort of cognitive energy that I get from just being able to just do me in a space, and when that me can fit into a workplace and a professional place, that's a different sort of unshackling.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily expect that everywhere, but I kind of had to almost like push my way into that to some extent. And part of it is there's a bit of privilege here. Some of it is like old experienced designer. Some of it is old white guy that gets asked to every table pretty much. But like a lot of it is I'm going to be the eccentric designer in the room. And this is the cost of me being
Yeah.
a creative is
Yeah.
that you have to deal
Yeah.
with some shit. But
Yeah.
that might look a little bit uncomfortable or might sound a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's okay. Let's have fun with that.
Yeah.
I need to kind of live the thing that I'm pushing. And we talked about that a lot, I think, in the
Yeah.
last conversation.
Yeah.
Just to live that space. So you coming in and sending out man, the stuff that I suggested for our wedding, Carrie was like, you've lost all privileges to contribute to this. I will send you an invite.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
She was like, my family is like
Yeah.
old school North
Yeah.
Carolina. They are
That
not
matters.
going to pick up. I'm like,
Yeah.
can we at least have James Brown as our song when we get it? No, James Brown. We will do some like, all right. It was we
Yeah.
had an amazing wedding. We had a blast. Everyone had a blast. She made an incredible thing. But
Yeah.
every like kind of like, all right, we're going to do something that's going to
Yes.
throw them off here. We're going to do something that is from me,
Yeah.
and they can take it or leave it.
Yeah.
Nope, that's all
Well,
right.
everybody's got that unique equation of trade-offs. And so,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds to me in your situation like the costs of some of those choices were perceived to be too high or higher than they were worth.
Right.
You have plenty of other
She didn't
places.
want to have to explain it.
You can have your authenticity at home, okay? Like, so
Yes, in
that's
private.
yeah, and I get that. Like we faced a lot of that. Okay, we're on a side quest, off of a side quest, off of a side quest.
Good.
But executive functioning, I am writing it down. So
Do it.
the wedding thing is a good example of this though, because it's one of those places where like everybody ends up facing, if you get married and have a wedding in the traditional Western sense, like I think everybody faces some mix of this because even for us, now we had been dating for 6 years, and we were already both of us very much like, look at, we are who we are, fuck all y'all if you don't like it. So we had
Yeah.
enough privilege and or life experience and or whatever, that we were already very comfortable in that like non-masked, I guess, place if you want to go with that language. But we also recognized that for a wedding, which we were regarding as let's have a party and celebrate all the people in our lives who help make us who we are. Like it was kind of
Mhm.
like a thank you for us to throw a party for everyone else. Now, it was still a traditional wedding in the sense that our parents wanted to help pay for it. Our parents wanted to invite certain people. Like it wasn't just like a little group. I think we had 100 guests. It was,
Mhm.
you know, a normal Western wedding. And
Right.
so we made like what you would call concessions in that way because we were like, well, it really isn't about us to us. I know to the guests it kind of is, but for us, we adopted this mindset, which was this was much more about us honoring all the people in our lives that make us possible and honestly make us us. Like, where does the couple end and the wedding end? Like good old
Right.
Nora, right? where's the end
Yeah.
of the couple and the beginning of the people? So anyway, so there was a lot of that spirit to it, which meant when I had to make, you know, when I wanted to do X and then I was like, this is gonna my mom's going to feel so uncomfortable with this because she doesn't care, but she's going to be worried about what her mom, you know, like there were places where
Mhm.
I did the same thing. The record thing, as an example, the invitation, though, we didn't send the obituary and side by side cover parody versions to like family. We sent it to
Right.
all of our friends and a few family members who we knew would like find it, would like it. But, you know,
Mhm.
there was the safe and the real. And the
Right.
same thing true with other choices. We did not get married in a church, which by the time I was 20, whatever I was, 25, 26 when we got married, um, that should have come as a surprise to no one. And yet,
Mhm.
nonetheless, it still took a little bit of like, no, we're not, neither of us believes in God. So we're not getting married in a church,
Mhm.
guys, get over it. But the next thing was songs. I walked into Ride of the Valkyries. I had my dad walk me though. I wanted that traditional piece of it, which is like fun and interesting if you think about it.
Yeah, I love
Um,
that conversation.
and then when you leave at the end of the ceremony, when we did it outside in a cool park, when we like were done and walked away, the recessional, yeah,
Mhm.
um, it was the song from the end of Star Wars in the throne room at the end after they get their medals and
Mhm.
walk out,
Yeah.
and then our first dance, Raining Blood, which was
Love it.
that's the last example I'm giving, but I'm giving it because music was really important to us. So those were the places where we wanted to be very authentic, and even if it meant different
Mhm.
and weird. But we didn't make it so that all the music played at the reception was metal. It was normal, fun. You know, we had a friend who DJ'd it and he did a killer job, and it was fun for everybody from like 6 year olds to 60 year olds or whatever. So, but that was our one thing. We were like, this song has special meaning to us for reasons, you know, that go back to us being a couple and just experiences and stuff. And like, we were like, that would be so awesome if that was like our first dance, like, you know. And so we did, and we
Right.
did a little tango to like the first part of it. We didn't do the whole however many minutes it is, like the first like maybe minute and a half, 2 minutes, and then we like spared people the rest. But we knew it was going to be really weird and not understood by some people. But a wedding is a place where people are willing to kind of be like, well, they're weird. This place was weird. This whole thing was weird. We can go talk about it later. But no one was going to come up to me and be like, that was a weird choice, because the
Right.
wedding kind of gives you that buffer zone of like, no one's going to do that to me. So I'll just do what I want. Whereas now I bring it back to, and you said at one point, authenticity. So the thing that I thought was a side quest isn't, because these are all part of that same chat, but that idea of like someone noticing something about you, your energy got big here,
Mhm.
etc. You'd think on the surface that that's like nice. I feel seen. I'm being myself, and someone is seeing that I'm passionate about this. But what I think triggers me about it in those cases that I mentioned, and the reason I'm bringing it back here, is because there's a really interesting difference between someone who is like, I see you for who you are, and I just am like noticing what you like and what you don't like, or what you care about or what you don't. There's a way to do it that expresses that. And then there's a way to do it that almost is like a distraction from that. So it's like there have been people, most of them have been not very good close friends, or some of them have been like coworkers that I wasn't ever really a big fan of, that would basically be like, I notice you do this, or I
Mhm.
notice you get really expressive about this. And when they say it to me, it feels like as if somebody walked up to me while I was having a really important, you know, I was sharing something like important and vulnerable, and having them be like, what's on your shirt right there? Like that's the feeling. And so
Yeah.
there's something there that pertains to the way everything we've been talking about, when you are trying to work with humans who create and co-create and constantly negotiate and adapt and change the meaning in something, and do it often through story sharing. we talk a lot about like soliciting stories, inviting people to share stories, having stories diffract through each other, and like, but, and the listening that goes with it. But the responding is something that I don't think we talk about enough here, but we probably make it a pretty explicit part of our work. Like if it's a survey, there's no response, it's thank you, and then we'll do something. But if you're doing this in person, how people respond to other people's stories is really, 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 really key. And I am
Mm-hmm.
just, as we're talking, that's why and asking myself, why did I joke that it triggers me? And I had to think about it. And I think that's part of the answer, which is a lot of it has to do with what you are doing to demonstrate how you are receiving this gift that someone is giving you by sharing an experience with you, or a story or a feeling
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. And not just the active listening, like, that sounds like it was really hard. Tell me more. Like, not that, guys. So I don't know where that goes, other than to say that is an interesting observation that this conversation is making me have. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that goes into the authenticity piece. I think it ties into any kind of work you are doing in human collaboration, like fuzzy block of stuff. I don't think people talk about this enough. And I don't think it's something you can engineer, obviously, but even in the form of facilitation that we often do, what are you doing in the facilitative process to arrange for interactions to allow people to respond such that the authenticity is encouraged and supported and made safe, and not cool story, here are the keywords I took away as you were talking.
Right. I've described this as grace. That's not too far. Like I align this to my understanding of grace is a better way to say that. But I think that one gets a little bit beaten up and overextended too, because grace is also abused, and there's a big problem with the expectation of grace from the people that like
Yeah.
probably have the least amount to spare, but I have the highest level of demand for it. Um, but it's as you were talking, this is almost this that sort of ancient reflex of just identifying, is this person part of my tribe or not?
Mm-hmm.
Is this a person that's contributing to me in
Yeah.
my uplifting,
Yeah.
or is this somebody that is from the other tribe that is in competition with me, that wants to kind of push down? It's a little bit different than grace, but it is trying. And so this is where I think when we talk about facilitation and we're talking about let's find the thing that brings people together first, start from that place of we're all here, we all showed up, sometimes voluntarily, typically not under too much duress, hopefully, but we're here because we care about a thing and we're seeing it and we're experiencing it and we're engaged in it. Just that initial component says this is a tribe that we are part of. But it tells me that that demands enough investment to make sure that that becomes sort of, I hate to say baseline, but I don't even want to, it sounds bad if I say it's taken for granted, but it
Yeah.
needs to be a bit automatic
Yeah.
to be able to have these sort of conversations.
Yeah. Well, you just need to build a little friction or like a little activation energy in, so that that whoever is in that space with you is actively choosing it, and therefore makes themselves safe. Whether, it's interesting you went to the, like, my tribe, not, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But it's funny because as you were saying it, my brain wanted to autocomplete, is this person safe for me to share this with?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, those two things overlap a lot, but maybe not completely. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably a Venn diagram with a big slice. So it is intriguing too, because, to your point, and again, I imagine this coach that you're working with, part of their job is to observe and listen for cues and signals that you can't see because you're the one generating them, and then either feed them back to you or hold a mirror up to you, or whatever metaphors coaches like to use. And um, like that's the value. That's the value of any kind of container, a coaching container, a friendship container, anything, right? Not the value, but a big value of it. And yet at the same time, the skills. Okay, this is the episode where I probably convince myself that I have a lot more respect for, no, I'm just kidding. People know how I feel about coaching when people ask me, do I do coaching? And I always am like, and I think we've talked about this in previous episodes, but the skill by which you can say to someone, I can tell that you're really passionate about this, and have it feel like what you're sharing is like really valuable and cool and whatever, meaningful, and not, I mean, you got something on your shirt there. Like, that is part of that collection of intangibles, soft skills, complex facilitation, whatever framing or words you want to give to it, that I'm increasingly, and now today, probably giving words to for my own benefit the first time ever, convinced is part of being able to lead, in a complexity savvy way, or not, again, I'm not talking mindset, I'm not talking like inner development, go
Right.
develop your skills to do this, but
Right. Non-procedural kind of way.
yeah. I don't know, this is
Yeah.
interesting. Go, keep going.
So, but I'll give you two examples of you to help. Maybe this will spark something.
Well, go ahead. Yeah, I was gonna say I have one last little thing I wrote here that's related.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
Well, but it might preclude what you're gonna say. But basically, the me that like people see on here is the same me that's in a work setting. It's like the same me. I mean, I obviously do have a different, like, people know when I'm on stage, they're like, wow, I see teacher Jen come out, like you project your voice more and you have like teacher. But other than that, it's not me really. Like, I am probably the same amount of expressive now in most environments, give or take the appropriateness of the environment. I'm not going to be super expressive at like a funeral, but basically that has not always been the case. When I was younger, I was like the stoic steel, did not express emotion of any kind. You may be surprised or not to know. Anybody who knows me is like, no shit. But it's not that I was doing that out of any kind of, so that wasn't masking. I wouldn't call what that about it was more that it was like, it didn't serve me in the environments that I was in, probably in a way that it doesn't serve most teenagers. And most of the ways that I learned to process my own thoughts and emotions in a very solitary way made it so that if I overexpressed, it was almost more like it was an energy drain that had no return for me. It was like if I was going to express something, it was for what end? Like, what will I, who's going to do anything with that, right? Which is an absurd question to ask, but that is the way that my brain, like, came to understand. So it would never suppress my emotions or my expression of things, but I was just not a very expressive person. And it's taken me a bit now as an adult to realize, when I have had people tell me, they're like, you're so expressive, you're so passionate about this, blah, blah, blah. And I've had to really kind of be like, who are you talking about? Not me. But I think that that's just come over the years. There was never a concerted effort. I didn't go to therapy and work through this or anything. I have done a lot of self-reflection on all kinds of things. But I think what has happened is that through getting lots and lots and lots of reps, interacting with lots and lots of different kinds of people, between teaching and between consulting, which puts you in lots of different contexts in like relatively short time frames, I think that it has kind of given me a lot more data points on the ways that being expressive, or when you are excited about something, having it actually come through your body actually can have a positive impact, because it's another signal for other people to relate to you. And the only way it started to happen, and I probably talked about this in another episode if I'm not mistaken, but in hindsight, where I really think the quote shift kind of started was when I started doing more physical activity. As a kid, I did not play sports. I did play sports in the neighborhood, but I didn't play organized sports. I did a lot of cerebral intellectual activities and did not run around and do anything really with my body. And then only when I got to college and I started doing some recreational activities with people like Frisbee and stuff, then I got into lifting. Then we talked about this once, I hope, because otherwise people are going to be like,
what? Definitely did.
Good. So you guys can go just remember that one. But basically, as I got into my body more, and between yoga, between hockey, between other types of sports and things that I do, it just started to happen. And only afterwards did I go, oh shit, actually what I thought about being expressive physically as a kid was wrong. But I will point out here to highlight, I didn't change my feeling or my mindset or my opinion about it, and then change my actions. My actions and behavior changed first as a natural emergent consequence of things that were happening overall entangled, not one thing. And then only as the behavior changed as an emergent result of other things in my life, then the behavior and the action having changed led to my own perception and mindset about it changing. So it is the
Mm-hmm.
reverse, once again, of what most people think that it is, right? Behavior first, then your thoughts can follow if they need to at all. So it's a good example of that. Now, you can say what you were going to say about 2 examples or 1 example or 0 examples.
This wasn't an observation about your expressiveness. More so, your style of coaching, which is, and obviously we haven't done that formally, but we're constantly passing ideas around and here,
Mm-hmm.
take a look at this, and like, yeah, like collaborating on where do we want to go next.
Yeah.
But
Peer
you,
coaching, like middle school style,
right.
right?
Yeah, there you go. Um, so there are other components that I see that are really important that like, I don't know if it's deliberate or if it's passive, but when you get excited about stuff, that's an energy that you also hand off to anyone else. I'm thinking about this thing. You're like, that's interesting. I'm thinking about it too. And then there's this and there's that. Did you check this out? Like, that's all you're stoking a big fire. That's coaching all day long. The other is sort of tying back to what I was saying about the tribe. We've had this conversation a couple times, usually on Slack, because I'll say, hey, take a look at this. This is something that's coming out of my brain at the moment. And you'll look at it and go, this is cool. I'm interested. This is a thing that I would change. And then you start getting critical. And then at some point you have to say, like, I don't want you to think I'm beating this up and all. And I'm like, I appreciate you saying that, but I brought it to you to beat up because,
Yeah, but not all people do that.
of
So,
course,
yeah,
exactly. So it's a good
yeah,
instinct to say this
yeah,
is not for this, but I think that's that tribe identification component
yeah.
that says like it's this. Or I think we talked about the mountain, the monastery. I already talked about this today, the mountain, the monastery, and the city. Are you familiar with
I
this?
am, but have we talked about it? I don't think
I
we
don't
have.
know.
Go, do it.
Okay, let's do it. So I heard this. I don't know if this came from David Krakauer originally.
I don't know
I
either.
don't know. When I went back and I listened to him to find out, he didn't cite anybody. Um, if it either way, it doesn't really matter. I heard this through Krakauer,
Yeah.
and I have a lot of respect for David Krakauer. Um, so he was kind of saying when you're working through developing ideas and or finding place or just wrestling with a sort of internal paradigm shift, I guess. We're scaling a mountain independently. We're doing the heavy lifting and the labor of taking on information that may fight with other information that we've got, experiences we've got, all those sort of things. We're going into undiscovered country with new ideas, all of that. The way to continue maturing this, and mature might not be the right word, but the way to continue developing this is once you've hit the top of the mountain is where you finally get to the point where you can reflect on this after you've done the labor. You move down to the monastery. The monastery is where we find our kinship. And these are people that we know that will reflect back at us and create a tension that will allow us to refine and develop and build.
Mm-hmm.
They'll share more information that will just feed into what we're working on.
Yeah.
It's not a place where we go in and say, I have an idea. And someone goes, that's a stupid fucking idea. Why are we even like, this is a place we know when someone's
Yeah.
going to say, I'm excited when you say that. It makes me think of this.
Yeah.
Right. So once we've built up enough sort of sinew from that tension in those conversations, we've developed those muscles, not become hardened. Now it's time to go to the city. And the city represents you're exposing yourself to nature. You're exposing yourself to humanity and these ideas, and you can cast them out there so that if everybody comes back and says, you're a freak, get out of the city, and starts throwing stones, you're not going to totally collapse. You've built up a good amount of muscle, but that's not it either. It's also the ability to see what is that response? How are things flowing? What am I observing and learning as I'm now outside of the echo chamber of the monastery, and exposing this to completely different ideas, completely, possibly a threatening idea that's out there.
Yeah.
And that's all that noticing is more of that information ingestion that
Yeah.
should create some wrestling. And then we go back up the mountain and do the labor of that ingestion and wrestling, and then the top of the mountain and the contemplation and all that kind of stuff. So
I just have to interrupt to say I'm familiar with this as well. I think I know it from Krakauer too, so I don't know if it's his or not. But I mean, odds are it's not. But we will go there.
right.
But it's funny because I don't think we've ever talked about it on this or at all. Like I love it as a metaphor. I don't think about it very often. It's wild to me that we've not talked about it. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. That trialectic. I love this. I don't know if that's a real thing, but I heard Dave Snowden mention it. I'm like, great, if he can get away with it, I'm going to take that.
Trilemma, trilectic, yeah.
Trilemma, yeah, trialectic. That's sort of the independent space, the support space, and then the sort of natural element space.
Yeah,
to me is really fascinating in progressing these ideas, facilitating those sort of spaces is really interesting. I think that's a lot of what we try to do with communities of practice. And this conversation is to try and invest in that monastery, because the city is definitely there. Without the monastery, it's fucking treacherous. So yeah, I steer into that one hard, but I see that relationship of needing to invest in that energy by saying, that makes me think of this. This is exciting. Like, continue, but also let me press on that. Let me poke and I don't think that has legs on it. That component of it, there's stuff here that's working, but that other thing is sort of dragging it. That's all that's necessary in the monastery setting. It's a different thing in the city
context. Yeah. Right. Okay. Two things. One. So what I'm hearing is that we're monks, and all I can help thinking of is the monks from Monty Python that hit themselves in the face with the board.
Yes.
That is this right here, everybody. That is this.
Love it.
Two, so you're making a very compelling case here on the notion of, like I said, the miseducation of Jen on the nature of coaching, which is not really a problem. And probably there have been times where you and I have talked about it here, in particular the episode with Sandra. There are others, but anybody who's interacted with me knows I get itchy about coaching for reasons we don't need to dive back into. Not because I actually have any problem with coaching as a concept or humans who do coaching for a living, any kind of coaching, like sports coaching, life coaching, career coaching. Right. But it is more than not the frequency, but the temptation for people to describe certain things as forms of coaching that I always feel like I want to push back against. And usually when they are directed at me. And it's not because I don't want to be identified as a coach, because it's like, ew, no, I'm not one of those. Like, I actually think it's probably one of the biggest compliments people pay me when they imply that they think what I'm doing is a form of coaching, even if it's informal. So I take it as a compliment deeply. But this is interesting here, and this is why I wanted to say this, was because what you're describing, as far as, well, everything you've just said, I won't repeat it, is a different conception of coaching, where the coaching itself is a distributed phenomenon, right? Rather than centered in me and my role as a monk in the monastery, rather than my behaviors entangled with other behaviors in the context of the monastery. And so the coaching is in the air. Yeah. Now I'm like, oh no, it's like everything else we're talking about lately. But I had to say that, because I don't know if those listening are kind of like hearing that without like the lived Jen experience and all the history of me being weird about the word coaching. But it is intriguing to think about that.
And I'm glad you said that, because how do you orchestrate? I'll use that word because it's a shitty word in this specifically in this context. How do you orchestrate that distributed support structure? And the answer is either you manipulate it or you coerce it, and none of that's good. But it's the space making of the monastery itself that fills itself up with the support structure, the people that want to come to contribute but also benefit in that relationship. And so everybody that's in that monastery is not there a as a one-way mentor. Everybody is there in a sort of cycle of reciprocity. And so
Yeah.
it's just the what we can do is create the space. That's about it,
Yeah.
and make it inviting.
You know, I'll take it a step further because this has been on my mind for a couple weeks now, but actually the Complexity Lounge meetup yesterday
Mm-hmm.
really sparked this more. But a step further than creating space, but without engineering something or
Mm-hmm.
orchestrating something, to me is occupying some of the space in a
Yeah.
way that you are. We said once before on an episode, like you are literally the difference someone encounters, right? That kind of notion. But yesterday in the Complexity Lounge, the presenter whose name I forget now, I feel bad, I should look it up, but she was great. Everybody should go look up
You
whoever.
go. I'll look.
Yeah, April 14th, Complexity Lounge meetup. When that video is online, you guys should watch. But she was just conveying some ideas from Simonson, the philosopher, who I'm also now deep diving into. But one of the metaphors was this notion, and it doesn't matter what it was in use for because it's more about what we're talking about here. When you undercool water, so like water, when it goes from liquid to solid, forms crystals. But if you cool it extremely slowly and extremely calmly under certain physical situations, it actually doesn't form the crystals right away. And it kind of creates this like it's like the opposite of something being like you ever like deal with like superheated water where it's been like heated, but it's heated very calmly and in a way where it doesn't actually boil. And then do you ever actually, God, okay, sorry, bad. I should have stepped back and thought through this before I said it.
Here we go, physics teacher.
Good physics. But like you ever heat up water in the microwave for any reason
Sure.
and say you heat it up for a little bit and it doesn't quite boil, or maybe it boils and it stops boiling, but you heat it some more and like it just gets hotter and hotter and hotter, but it doesn't boil for reasons I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to get into. Then you put something in it, a fork or a spoon, it goes,
Yep.
and then you
Mm-hmm.
like burn yourself. You've superheated the water. The actual temperature of the water is higher than the boiling point, but it hasn't started to boil because the action of boiling is actually distinct from like the temperature. Again, so the same thing kind of happens the opposite direction with cooling. And she used the example and she said, you can get water to that state where it hasn't crystallized yet, but it's below the freezing point. But then all you need is for one little thing, an impurity or a thing that's introduced into it to seed, and immediately the whole thing crystallizes very quickly. So it's kind of the same as the other way around. And so she gave the water cooling example. Today, now I've also thought of the superheating example. And those both then reminded me of, do you remember the Mentos and Coke phenomenon?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So for any of our listeners who don't know what the hell I'm talking about, just Google Mentos and Coke. But like there was this era, it's actually Diet Coke. There was a phenomenon that was all the rage for a while that I don't think anybody cares about anymore. But if you drop one of like Mentos, like the mint candy, whatever they are, they're like the little disc shaped things. You drop one of them into a 2-liter bottle of Diet Coke and it just like explodes.
Yep.
That's a different phenomenon. It's not cooling or heating. It's actually called nucleation, but it's because Mentos on their surface have like a ton of little textured little impurities, and they give surface area for the gas that is dissolved inside the liquid, which is the carbonation, something to stick onto and come out of solution. And so all the bubbles in the gas immediately like chain reaction come out, and then you get the blah, blah, blah. Anyway, take those three. I think about those when people talk about planting seeds and they think literally about seeds in soil and germinating. I would say over the last 3 months or so, I have started to think about seed in other ways as like seeding the crystallization of that water that's been undercooled, seeding in the sense that, ooh, perfect, like emotional center to this.
This is your entry music. That's the new immolation record that just decided to play as you were talking
perfect.
here. So I turn it back up and
we call Ross Dolan and be like, yes, please.
Yeah.
But yeah, so basically thinking about your role in creating space, but to go a step further, you might also end up being one of those, the fork that drops into the superheated water, because the water might have been ready for a while, but it needed that foreign object to come in and go, bleh, or to be the little thing that drops into like undercooled water that will suddenly crystallize, or be the Mento that gets dropped into the Diet Coke. the Mento isn't doing anything. The Mento is not an agitator being like,
It's just being
hi.
a memento.
The
Yep.
Mento, by virtue of its presence in the Diet Coke,
Mm-hmm.
has initiated but made possible, more than that, made possible other things to do things. So be the
This is what Wally's
Mento,
about.
be the Mento in the Diet Coke in the world you want to see. Sorry, go ahead.
This is what Wally's about.
Yes, yes.
He's just Wally in
Yeah,
a place that's
what?
incompatible with Wally.
It all just goes back to Wally, man.
Go watch
Everything
Wally.
always gets back to Wally.
Systems change. That is chapter 1 of the systems change.
I couldn't even watch Wally today if I had to. I would just cry. Like I couldn't even do it. I wouldn't emotionally do
amazing. That wasn't of all of the Pixar movies that like turned me into a mess. That's not one of them. I don't fall apart with that one.
I mean,
but
I would probably fall
Coco,
apart
I can't
with all
do.
of them.
I mean, I can do it, but holy shit, Coco.
I haven't seen that. I haven't actually. You're like, don't.
Unreal. No, go see it. It's amazing. And it's music. It's all about music.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh. Yeah. We don't need to, I don't know if we need to get on that tangent. Go ahead.
2 things.
Yes.
So, one, really interesting about the super cooling. I used to make clear ice for my cocktails back when.
Yeah.
And the method for doing that is you slowly cool, but directionally is really important because all of the crystallization pushes all the impurities and all of the non-just H2O out of the way.
Yeah.
But the reason why you see your ice cubes the way they are in the ice tray is they're clear on the outside, and then in the middle there's this big bubble of mush, and it's because it's omnidirectional. And so it's interesting to think about that in a directional sense, in a timing sense. So angle of approach is just as important as
so you're creating the space
getting trapped
in the monastery, but remember that creating the space doesn't happen all at once. It might move in. So anyway, it's like when you're mopping or you're cleaning the floor or something. If you're not careful, you mop yourself into the center, and you're like, "Fuck!"
Right?
So yes. Guys.
Now you're trapped. You're still you, and now you're stuck in the middle of the kitchen with nothing to do but watch the floor dry. Yeah.
Or risk, getting it dirty again. Anyway, go ahead. Carry on.
Yeah. So the other thing, as you were talking, I was thinking, great. So you were doing you at this wedding venue, your wedding, and so that's your monastery. How did that? Now you established the monastery by just doing your shit, but you also invited.
Yes.
And so it was still your kin that was there, but even for them, it was still a little bit. Jarring's not the word, but it was still a little gauche for their expectations. It was a different wedding. Yeah. It's not a typical Italian-American Northeast wedding.
It was definitely different. Like when Waldorf and Statler from the Looney Tunes, from the Muppet Show, they sit up in the balcony. They're the ones who go, they make fun of things. They're one of their phrases that we use a lot around here is, well, that was different, terrible, but different, and like, there were people driving home after our wedding who were like, that was different, but like, complain all you want. It was an open bar and it was free, so shut the fuck up, right? So like there's that piece of it. But yeah, there most things. I never expected I would talk about my wedding this much on this podcast. But it's a really good representative example of, and I don't really often think about it this way, but when we talked the one time about magnets, this is an example where I'm saying, here I am, get sucked into the orbit if you want, get sucked into the creative zone, like, it's here for you. It's open. It's available. If you get a little close and decide you don't like it, like I'll set you free. But it's not just like, let your freak flag fly or like shine your bat signal. It's not that, because I'm not trying to find like my people. I'm sort of just like, hey, this is the space and this is how we're doing it here. And we're not doing it. So to contrast, I have been at weddings. There's one I'm thinking of. I won't say much more about it, but the couple really did not think. They had a weird wedding too. So it was another one of those. And they didn't give much thought to the guest experience. Now, as an experienced designer person, especially at the time, I was literally doing like UX and experience design and strategy. I was keyed in to think about that anyway, but it wasn't just like, boy, they didn't give people enough information, but it was hard to know what to expect. It was clear this was not going to be a normal wedding. The ceremony was in like the middle of the woods. There wasn't really good signage. People didn't know where to park. It was not clear whether there was going to be food served or was it going to be potluck. Like it was just very like, but it wasn't so far on the end of like hippie wedding where it's like, hey, y'all come have a good time, bring what you want. Like then everybody would just kind of know it's like every man for himself. Like it was in the no
Yep.
man's land between we're doing this a little formal Western style, but we're also doing it like hippie style. We want to be outside of that, but we also want to benefit from that. Like, and I
Yeah.
contrast the two because I do pride myself on the fact that we did think about deliberately the guest experience, not just
Hmm.
because I think about experience, but because I wanted folks to feel that the space had been created and for them to feel like welcome, poke your head in the monastery. And if you're like, no thanks, that's okay. But this other wedding would be a good example of there's no monastery here. There's just, the mountain and people doing a weird dance in the middle and nothing to really get your bearings. And, but that may
That's
not
so
be true for
fascinating.
everyone else. Like everybody else who was at that wedding might have been like, love this. These are my people. And I love that there was literally no guidance or structure of any kind provided. And I want this level of whatever. So
Hmm.
that's kind of part of the point of it. But it was less about, I think for people who wanted to get some purchase or like to get a grip on what was actually happening in that event, there was nothing to grab onto if you didn't already have it. And that was kind of the difference for me and how I would think about it.
You know what's fascinating? Because we started this with there's no such thing as strategy.
There's no such thing as strategy.
I went to a wedding years ago, old friend of mine who she got married up in the Catskills, up by David Bowie's house. If that helps, not locate, but give you an impression of like deep in the Catskills. And they had this amazing outdoor setup. It's a middle of July. The Catskills are a humid, swampy mess
That's how this
in
was.
July. 95 degrees and 80% humidity for the entire
Mosquitoes.
month.
Yeah.
And mosquitoes, yeah, everywhere. So it's outdoors, of course. And they had this long, thin, like old school village type table that was like, they must have had like a dozen of them linked up, and everyone was going to sit shoulder to shoulder. And you were like, I mean, the table was literally maybe 4 feet wide, 3 feet wide, probably. It was tight. They had she's a florist, like the amount of plants and everything around, the lighting, absolutely gorgeous. And they did it at somebody's house, a friend of theirs. It was a pretty small house in the mountain. It was not David Bowie's house. This was not a Master of the Universe up there. Just like a nice sort of mountain cabin-ish type of thing. And she probably had about 60, 70 people there. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
huge. It was a great number, especially since it was pouring rain the entire time, like torrential downpour, except for the couple of minutes when they did the ceremony. And the ceremony was led by a diviner, and we ended up like taking our shoes off and walking around in circles. It was a hippie wedding all day long. But there was enough planning that it all went to shit, and the dependencies all fell apart just because of the rain, because weather did exactly what weather is
Yeah.
supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I left a little early. Like it might have shaped up into something amazing. I know they had a blast. They got to see everybody. That was what was important for them. They had their day.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there was more of a sort of, not a build it and I hate the if you build it they will come sort of approach to this sort of stuff,
Yeah.
but the space making and the invite and the ambiguity allowing it to sort of become itself.
Yeah.
I don't know that anyone's willing to try a wedding that way necessarily. I've never been to one. I'm sure somebody's tried something like that. I take that back. But be interesting if they had approached it that way.
Yeah.
To now we're in the rain. We know it's going to rain as of this morning. So
Yeah.
everybody like take their jacket and tie and dress off and
Yeah.
wear something comfortable to stand in the rain. And what can we do that's going to be amazing in the rain? How
Yeah.
do we have a rain
I mean,
wedding?
especially when it comes to weddings though, like weddings have been happening for so long in so many forms that like these aren't things that
Sure.
have never happened before. So there's part of it that realizing we're talking about weddings as a metaphor for other things, but there are things out there that are not as patterned and well sort of, I don't know, experienced by many people in some form or another over the years. But yeah, to that end, I kind of think about like rather than an instinct to plan for every contingency, which is what some people do, wedding planners and or couples, whatever it is, the bride, blah blah blah. One way is to try to plan for every contingency.
Mm-hmm.
And another is to be like, everybody just be ready for anything. But I think about it as like informed consent. Because like when I talk about thinking about the experience,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't literally engineering the experience I wanted all of my guests to have. I didn't like rent a bus or a trolley for everybody to cart them from place to place. I did say, we're going to be here, then we're going to be here. If you need to arrange to like carpool with people, we can hook you up. But like otherwise, we're
Mm-hmm.
going to let you get from place to place however you want. If you get lost or you want to not do this thing and skip this part, you can. So we didn't like design the experience on such rails that like experienced designers might sometimes think about what they're doing. We designed the experience in the way that most experience design actually unfolds, which is we put the components in people's hands and let the experience be created and mediated by the combination of the stuff and the people and whatever. And to that end, I felt like the main thing that needed to happen was that people needed to simply know what was set in stone and what wasn't. They have informed consent to participate or not in various things, including if it's weird, like if we were doing it in the woods and it might rain, like you hear it, we can't control the weather. There's no tent, so plan accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
Just and if I'm a guest, then I am way more happy to be like, cool, man, I'm gonna just wear a t-shirt and jeans then, and not wear my finest dress if you guys aren't gonna have a tent and
Right.
I don't want to stand with an umbrella. Like it's a way of giving people permission. Like informed consent
Mm-hmm.
is like you have permission to choose whatever makes you feel best in participating. And that's it
Yeah.
is important to remember, like, again, metaphor alert, guys. This is a metaphor. When you're a guest at a wedding, you're a participant.
Mm-hmm.
You're not a passive receptive.
Oh
You're
yeah.
active
You make the
participant.
wedding.
And
Yeah.
that's I think important to think about if you want to then take everything we've talked about with weddings today and port it over to all the other things that it's actually meant to be a metaphor for. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking of Nora Bateson. Um,
Really?
really? How,
What
what?
are the odds? What time is it? Is it Nora time?
Right. It is almost on the hour. So we almost got away without me. You've mentioned her already. I haven't brought
No,
it
I
up
know I
yet.
brought her
And
up.
almost an hour and a half. So I liked to explain the difference between aporia and confused in the Cynefin domain, that center component,
Yeah.
as the difference between overpacking for a trip when we don't know where we're going versus knowing you don't know where you're going and preparing yourself to sort of learn along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And Nora has her sort of meditation questions that she repeats, and she goes through the fate. So it was, who can I be when I'm with you? The authenticity question.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was, how does a meadow know how to be a meadow? But the new one now is, I found resonant. I'm certain she didn't steal this from me because I haven't had a big megaphone with this. But her new meditation is, how do we pack for a trip when we don't know when we're going or where we're going?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's it. I just couldn't let an entire episode go by without mentioning Nora.
I mean,
That's
that's what we're
really
talking about with the wedding stuff, and it's what we're kind of
right.
talking about even when we get to the authenticity piece, which is
Mm-hmm.
where are we going, us as humans, with each other in individual
And the who can
environments.
I be when I'm
Oh, of
with
course,
you,
of
because
course.
I'm asserted into the monastery isn't a thing. It's made by the monks.
Yeah, yeah. And so we probably should go soon, but I'm
Yeah.
thinking too where this is kind of at, like the notion of back when we were talking about like you see a coach or a friend picking up on your energy's different.
Mm-hmm.
And that knife edge between that being a welcome observation versus um, sort of like an analysis or again, I want you to see me as a human, not as an object of study. You know what I mean? Like human to human is different from observer observed. Like that's one of the other dynamics shifts there that I was talking about feeling. And I once, like I joked, I literally had a coworker come up to me one time. We were interacting about something at my desk at work, and he at some point in the interaction said, the way that you're standing is telling me XYZ. And I was immediately like, what the actual fuck? Because I wasn't standing like, I wasn't like doing like something super obvious. And I go, what makes you think that? Like, are you not listening to the words I'm telling you? And he goes, yeah,
Right.
but I've studied body language and your body is telling me X. And immediately what that means is you're not listening to what I'm saying. You are choosing to actively ignore what I'm saying in favor of what you're reading on my body. And that is extremely disrespectful to me because now that's different from someone going, I'm hearing what you're saying, but I'm also taking in what you're doing. And together I'm marrying the two. It's like, that's my
Yeah.
point, is that this is a knife edge, the difference. So it isn't what he was doing in and of itself was wrong. It was the spirit of what he was doing was saying, I'm going to discount the words that come out of your mouth completely in favor of what I'm reading on your body language that I learned from some book that who knows what it was, versus someone
Yeah.
who's saying, I'm actually going to just put all of these together in a complementary and, like, you know, diffract them through each other and share them with you in a way that gives you a chance to respond to them, not just
Hmm.
declare what you're saying, Jen, is not what you mean. Here's what you mean, which gives me no room to respond. But the reason I bring that up, just to come back around here with the
Hmm.
Nora thing, is that's an environment sort of, or an example where it isn't about who am I and who can I be when I'm with you. It's where are we going? You've literally made it so that I have no option. There's nothing I can put in my suitcase because you have taken the suitcase away from me. And now I don't know where this interaction goes. And you have taken from me the ability to know where this conversation is headed because you've decided you're in control. And so, like,
Yeah.
that's the knife edge between how someone responds when you are sharing a thing or talking or whatever it is.
I get into this conversation too often where there's that seeming gap between my body language, my tone, my pheromones, whatever, and the words that are coming out of my mouth.
Yeah.
And like control is the right word. That's the point of confused. I'm going to assess the situation with, I'm going to know, I have to have my expertise and I need to assert that
Yeah.
expertise and plan for everything and have control over all of the possible outcomes. And when the conversation turns into, I'm discrediting the words that you're using because there is something that is in opposition of my understanding of your words and your action,
Yep.
I'm going to shut this thing down because I can't handle it. That
Yep.
is the
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking control. And
Yep.
versus what I find fascinating is when people ask me, or I get a chance to ask people, like, it's so interesting that you said it that way. And did you notice that like your fist got really tense or something? Like
Yeah.
and that doesn't reconcile for me, but I want to know more.
Right.
I don't have an answer. I
And
have
you're
a better
asking from a
question.
place of curiosity, and
Yeah.
you're allowing those contradictions to continue to exist
Mm-hmm.
versus somebody else who can't handle this plurality or these contradictions and therefore forecloses on all of it and anything that comes out of it. And I think that's the spirit of it, you know. It's so if you think about it as like a quote practitioner, how do how do you be more of, you know, the former and not the latter, or the latter and not the
Mm-hmm.
former, right? And that practice, which is probably tied up in, like we've talked about, a practice of noticing, a practice of attention. But, you know, like I said earlier, I mean, I'm increasingly thinking about the actual verb, which is the response, the meeting, not matching. There's some Nora for
Mm-hmm.
you, you know, the like, that is the piece that I think is, I'd like to hear and see more about it in our world right now, frankly. In our world, meaning in the communities we find ourselves in. So I'll be curious to see if I'm reading signals and don't recognize yet that that's what I'm doing. If we start to hear more people talking about that, I don't know. But maybe that's a reasonable place to draw to a close. Go ahead. You can have the last.
I my only question there that just popped up, and I don't know that you have an answer, and I don't know that I do either. But we were talking. I was saying before, like I'm trying to acknowledge: are you part of my tribe,
Yeah.
or are you part of the other tribe? And I think what you were just saying was wanting more of this is that ability to say not just are you part of my tribe, but can I understand whatever tribe it is you're
Oh
in,
yeah.
because we're not finishing each other's sentences, which
Yeah.
means maybe that doesn't qualify in this context as what I would call
Yeah.
my tribe, but I'm still actively curious and willing to extend
Yeah.
to understand a little bit better,
Well,
and not that just we're on the opposite ends of the gulf.
so I promised I'd give you the last word, and I will. But since I can,
No,
I
go
feel
ahead.
like I
I'm
can't.
done after that.
No, I was gonna say I
I
can't.
think.
I feel like it's worth answering this because
Mhm.
it doesn't. I don't think it takes a long answer, honestly. But for me, I think that the kind of thing is, I don't even really answer. Well, I don't think about. Nobody consciously thinks about. The question isn't, are you part of my tribe?
Mhm.
I don't actually care about that anymore. Which is a weird thing to say. I am probably more thinking or asking myself, are are you part of a tribe? And if so, what tribe?
Mhm.
And you can almost kind of only get away with interacting in ways that pose that question. Not nobody does it consciously. If you yourself don't walk in with your tribal flags like all over you. So I would probably say that, at least for me, if I'm reflecting honestly, I don't even like the "Are you my tribe?" question. Not because I think the spirit of the way we've been talking about it today, obviously
Yeah,
totally appropriate. And we all have, like, I have my tribe.
of
Part of
course.
why I don't ask that question is because I have my people in my life who I can, they're my shelter, they're my inspiration, they're my safe spaces. They shift. It's not like the same thing all the time. But I just feel like I can find that shelter in a lot of places too. So it makes it so that now for me, more often the interaction is, are you part of a tribe at all? And
Hmm.
who and what is it? And to the in the spirit of warm data, which we know is a big part of what the thinking and rationale and ideas around warm data and warm data labs are, to encourage that, right? That trans
Hmm.
contextual, but in a way also trans tribal in the metaphorical sense of the word, sharing and interacting and weaving of meaning and ideas and identities. And part of the way that, when I first encountered her concept of warm data, and part of why I ultimately did decide to do the training, was because I wanted to understand the difference between a warm data lab as a container in which people have to enter to do that versus warm data exchange out in the wild. And
Hmm.
I would argue that there are people, and I think that I am one of them, who has been doing what I would call, and this is not I would say like sanctioned by Nora, so I wouldn't use this language literally. I think a lot of us, or at least I, engage in warm data exchange in the wild, not in the
Hmm.
lab. Now, I actually know and understand that, like, the point is not the safety of the lab, or that we're going to solve all of our problems by inviting everybody in the population into warm data labs. But anyway, in the spirit of your question, that I was like, you know what? I think there's a pretty reasonable answer to this, in that I think for us a lot, as practitioners who are interested in trying to not only serve epistemic justice and let what people feel be the thing and not be interpreted by someone else, and to, like, understand that the diversity of perspectives is important and not just a nice to have, but it is how things are going to evolve and move in a progressive way if we ever, want to, like, survive
Hmm.
as a species. I
Hmm.
think there is more to it than, are you my tribe? And it isn't just, ooh, post tribal world. No,
Right.
it is, there are tribes that we all operate in. So what are they, and are you aware of them, and what tribes are you in, and such and such. So it's a very minor tweak on the question, but there's my answer. Now you can have the final word.
I don't know that much. I got to reframe the talking about tribe to plural, knowing that we
I mean, also,
navigate
yeah,
multiple
you know
tribes
that
and
that answer is not even
right,
directed at you, because
right,
you're,
right.
you're
Yeah,
already
yeah,
we're already doing
yeah.
we're doing warm data exchange in the wild too. But
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, but it's good to note that, and probably the throwing the word tribe around
yeah, it's,
is obviously a bit. Although I, you ask us, I believe you ask a anthropologist or sociologist what a group of humans are. It seems like a group of horses is a herd, right? Then, or cows is a herd. A group of humans is a tribe. That's just that, but it also carries a lot of other water. I know, but where was I going with that? I'm rambling
I
here.
mean, tribal's a tough word, but I actually think it's okay.
You know what I mean? There, it's contextual. We need a better word for a because the way that I connect, I go find a bunch of Saints fans, and they have no idea about. Not everybody, but we don't connect on this level. The conversation we've just had for the last hour and a half,
Yeah,
we are singing about how great it was when Drew Brees was our quarterback.
right,
We finish each other's sentences in that
right.
context. Invite them into this context, and it may be very, very different, and vice versa. I invite a bunch of people
Yeah.
in this
Well, then
conversation to talk about NFL, and it might go a very different direction. And
invite
that's
them in,
that's
and
the
then
tribes,
we start talking about weddings, and all of a
right?
sudden our tribes are overlapped on
Mm-hmm.
that point, and there's
Bingo.
warm data. So does it
Yes.
have to happen in the container of an event, or does it happen on an airplane or at a bar or at a, you know what I mean? So
It's the hyphenated, the human hyphen X.
yeah,
Isn't that
actually,
interesting?
okay, I'm gonna leave this for next time, but I am laughing though, the notion of tribe and tribalism. Yes, I know there are problematic origins in that, but at the same time, it's a word people go to. I mean, I think a lot about cultural worldview, which is what cultural theory refers to it as, but cultural worldview versus tribal is like it's too jargony. We just need a different like collective noun. We need to come up with something new. I mean, you were like, what's a group of people? And I'm like, well, God, there's so many words for that besides tribe, but which
Sure.
ones could, or what other new word could we grab and coin for a group of people that is entangled in a way that we usually use the word tribe for?
Right.
So not family, not community, not fandom. It's pieces of those, but it's not wholly those. So maybe this is a
Mm-hmm.
homework assignment for us and for anybody who watches this.
Oh, you had to kick that off because now I want to go. Like I got another hour in the tank. All of a
I
sudden,
can stay
there's
for,
that energy.
I can do like 5 more minutes. You got some? You got some already? See, I have to go think.
Well, it's just like when you mention community, like the people I grew up with, we have a context of shared place and
Mhm.
experience and time that has a very different conversation. I don't like than other shared contexts of people I
Yep.
go to concerts with or
Yep.
meet at particular context. So I don't know that community is a bad word, but I think it's a great word, and I think
Oh,
it might be exactly what you're talking about. But it was interesting. It's interesting to think that how that entanglement shows up, how difficult that makes this task, because it's trying to say, how do I meet a
yeah.
group of other people in a shared
Yeah.
identity when that meeting presents itself in so many different ways?
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
Yeah.
That's kind of fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe it's neighbors,
Hmm.
but not
You've gotten me saying fellow travelers.
not literal. Well, yeah, I mean, I like fellow travelers, but also fellow travelers has the like communist origins and the sort of like this kind of thing piece to it. That's usually I'm using it in trying to instill
Right.
that piece of it. Like we see each other even if we can't name it out loud.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. Okay. Whatever. I'm gonna say we gotta go because I'd rather. I'm gonna just noodle on this one. This one will be fun.
Maybe,
Let's do
yeah,
like a
we'll revisit.
contest. Let's see if we can like.
Yeah, fill in
everybody,
the comments
everybody
with.
submit their vote for the replacement for the word tribe when you talk about a group of humans that we would normally describe
Mhm.
as experiencing some tribal affinity, and we're using tribal in a metaphorical sense, but it's just the one we all go to. So I mean, I know the other like terminology that sociologists and anthropologists use for these
Mhm.
dynamics, but I don't want that. I don't want that. I want like
Yeah.
something silly. For example, whenever my husband and our previous dog, um, he was bulldog poodle mix, and we used to have fun joking about the mighty boodle as a species. We'd never heard of any other dog, we just called him a boodle. And one time we were talking about how like there were a bunch of crows, and I was like, oh, and then those have an interest, murder of crows, and we're talking about collective nouns for things. And he was like, what do you think the collective noun for a boodle is? What are you, a blank of boodles? And he was a funny, silly dog. So like right off my tongue without even, it didn't stop in my brain. It just came out. A circus. The collective noun for
Ah,
a boodle is a circus of boodles. So if you ever
love
saw
it.
more than one, I never did, but you ever saw more than one bulldog poodle mix, you'd say there's a circus of boodles over there. So I want that. I want like funny and or poetic or weird. I don't want like give me the closest like, academic kind of descriptor for this dynamic that we are talking about that is tribalism, or social identity or identity protective, blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
I want like a circus of blank, or whatever. So that's the challenge to our listeners who
All
by
right,
the time they
and
watch.
I'll put a highlight on that.
Yes.
If there are any biologists listening, are there any, well, maybe biologists, are there animals that come together just for the sole purpose of like a task, not for any, and then they just disperse? like we're gonna shake this tree. We'll all pick up our own apples, and then like we don't have a. It's not a collective beyond that, but it's a temporal collective
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because that's kind of how I think about these contextual and temporal. Can be
It could be temporal,
generational.
it could be spatial, it could be any number of dimensions, but it's like
Sure.
fleetingly on that dimension.
Yeah.
It doesn't occupy the whole dimension all the time. It's
Right.
not in
It's
all
pivoting that
spaces. It's not at all times. It's not.
multiple people navigating a plurality of identities that in that navigating cluster every once in a while.
The answer is a civilization. No, this is good. Now I'm going to go hunting for like biological terms.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. That means I got to get this up now so we can get some answers off of YouTube or LinkedIn because I got to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Good. On that note,
All right.
I'm
Love
going to
it. This
stop.
is fun.
This is good.